Coming up just in time for the NFL draft, rumors abound as the New York Football Giants are getting heavily attached to Drake Maye. Can they move up? Will they move up? And what would the price point mean for the Big Blue to go get their franchise guy? We dive in on it all coming up next. Yes, my friends. It is OGP, the One Giant podcast, where you know that we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, Andrew Makowitz. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're wise, and we're brought to you by Pietential, Pietential, Pietential.com. It's an online assessment survey, basically a free tool for individual users to set a baseline for your well-being. Also gives you methods and tools to help make progress in those areas and also track how you are progressing across time. Why? Because it matters. You can't sit here and think that you got everything figured out just right. Joe Schoen, I believe, on an individual level, will be using this tool throughout the draft weekend. Get over to pietential.com today, Pietential. Andy, how are we as the rumors buzz here? And we'll get in on Drake Maye, top 30 visits, and so much more just one day out from the draft.
We were wondering how I'm doing good, Adam. We were wondering how long it would take for the Giants to circle back and be connected to Drake Maye. And I think back in the middle of March, we even put out things like, I wonder how long it's going to take to move off of JJ McCarthy and over to Drake Maye. And wouldn't you know it, it's about 36 to 48 hours before the NFL draft comes out. The new reports have spoken. Adam, talk to me. What are we hearing the latest and greatest is for the Giants at number 6?
Well, it is funny, right? Because you mentioned there was like one little blip on a radar going back a month or so ago. It was like, oh, the Giants, yeah, they really do like Drake Maye. Okay, see you later. We don't nothing really to talk about, nothing to see here. And then it goes radio silence. Now, all of a sudden, with the draft a day away, it's become all but confirmed that New England Patriots are open for business at the 3 spot and that the New York Football Giants, who were speculated to be interested in JJ McCarthy, now are willing to acknowledge that, oh my goodness, Drake Maye would be the perfect quarterback for Big Blue if we can go get him. Do you find it? We talk about just about the Patriots angle of this because I think comparing these two franchises right now is very interesting as well. But do you find it somewhat not shocking, but I think surprising in the way that I would talk about Marvin Harrison Jr.? Well, we don't talk about Drake Maye. Why? Because there's no real chance that the Giants are going to get him. Same thing with Marvin Harrison Jr. Oh, this little tiny window where he falls magically to 6, but most likely he's not going to be there. That's how it's felt all the way up until about 16 hours ago when all of a sudden the floodgates opened. Patriots are open for business, and now it's just a matter of, are the Giants going to be capable of going and getting him?
Yeah, it is interesting how the winds and the tea leaves continue to blow in different directions. It felt like the same people that are telling us
It's
how excited the Giants are to trade Jake Maye were shoving JJ McCarthy down everyone's throat for months. The Giants are excited. Is 6 too high for JJ McCarthy? Should the Giants trade up to 4 for JJ McCarthy? JJ McCarthy has all the traits. You guys just don't see it. You don't watch enough film. Like, you don't understand what we know. It's clearly going to be JJ McCarthy. And that is, Adam, the line that we have been hearing from local and national media reporters for months. And it is kind of crazy to think in an instant, literally within a couple hours, it's like everyone got the same piece of paper or the same text message that was like, okay, guys, now this is the thing that we need to talk about. Even so with the JJ McCarthy stuff, as much as the interest in Drake Maye is the thing that everyone's reporting, then all of a sudden there's pieces where, social media is now saying JJ McCarthy is not the type of guy and skill set that the Giants are looking for. And national and local media are saying, I second, I third, I fourth this. And it's like, what happened? You guys were the ones that were telling us this was the case the whole time. Now you're basically saying like, oh, you fools, you peasants. Like you were taking all the breadcrumbs that we were giving you and you fell for it. It's kind of crazy how quickly everything swings and we're just expected to move on from whatever was told to us before.
Of course it is. Yeah, like it's insane. Like it's objectively insane. And like we've talked about, we cover these different narratives, and we went down the road of, well, what would it mean if they wanted JJ McCarthy? Kind of even going beyond whether or not we thought that he was the right fit or we would want them to draft him, right? Like we've talked about wanting Roma Dunze and thinking that made the most sense at 6 overall. And I still feel that way. But when you open up the window on a higher profile quarterback, it certainly changes things. But that's the part. It is the part that just absolutely blows my mind. Like what happened to Tuesday? Like, what happened to Monday? Like, there was a moment ago when it was like, hey, JJ McCarthy, and listen, there was always still the element with JJ McCarthy that a lot of people were saying, like, hey, if you look at how he grades out and where he ranks, you brought this up the last time we were on. Hey, he's kind of like top 30 player, but he's not really in the top 5 area. So it is interesting that he keeps getting brought up in that vein. So, okay, let's go down the tinfoil hat scenario. It's all a
Oh
smokescreen.
yeah.
Throwing JJ McCarthy into the mix is all to try to get another quarterback buzz around here and make people think that that's what the Giants are interested in. And they're willing to sit there. If that's the case, though, Andy, because I'm not the tinfoil guy here, then why would they tell everybody now that they want Drake Maye so much? Why would now be the time to lift up the veil? Because if I were someone that wore a tinfoil hat, I would immediately go, so what do the Giants really want? Because it's obviously not Drake Maye. Because if they did, they wouldn't be saying anything about it. And this would be all Joe Schoen, hush, hush, behind closed doors, trying to work the phones and trying to find a way to get from 6 to 3 without alerting Denver, without alerting Minnesota that it is possible and there is potential there, something that obviously the New England Patriots wouldn't care about keeping under wraps.
So tinfoil hat Andy, who
Here we go.
loves this time. I love the speculation. I love all of the things that are just opinions and thin air of what's happening. Eh, Is this another smokescreen for the Giants? Now we know Joe Schoen on Friday said, I'm going to let my draft board get set by Friday night. We're not going to look at it over into the weekend. We're not going to modify it. Like analysis by paralysis is not good for anyone. And then all of a sudden on Monday, it's like, well, Monday, Tuesday, Drake Maye is the guy. And everyone is reporting that Giants are looking into moving up potentially with the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, if I had to guess, the JJ McCarthy buzz of him going in the top 5 has lessened. And so
Sure.
that talk track of the Giants taking him at 6, everyone's like, okay, good. Take him at 6. Like,
Sweet.
go ahead. Have your way with him. We don't want him at 6. And so the
Right.
Giants lose all the leverage of them putting out that they've liked JJ McCarthy for quite some time. So what do? You make sure that you lock in that 3 quarterbacks will go in the first 3 picks so that when you pick at 6, you still have the option of one of those top line, top flight wide receivers that we have mentioned before. I believe that to still be the case because why are we not hearing anything about Roma Dunze?
Yeah.
Why is it all about JJ McCarthy and Drake Maye? If Joe Schoen really wanted them, don't you think he would be talking about like, well, maybe we will move Evan Neal inside and take Joe Alt or something? Like he's not saying any of that. All we're hearing is the obsession that the Giants have with these quarterbacks. And to me, I'm still in smokescreen situation where I think this is another one throwing it off the scent to what the Giants are really looking to do.
Do you objectively, before we're going to get into in segment number 2 about the actual price point and what that would look like for the Giants draft board, we also have top 30 visits, offensive and defensive linemen. So there's some things that we want to get to here, but there's clearly a difference here. So there's two parts to this. One, there's clearly a perceptual difference in the profile of player, Drake Maye versus JJ McCarthy. So I think it at least changes the idea of, hey, if I can get JJ McCarthy or I can get Drake Maye, that feels different for a certain segment of the fan base, no doubt, right? Bulk of the fan base is like, oh, go get him. That's the guy. The other part of this, so give me your feedback there, but also, even though we know that the Washington Commanders have been heavily tied to Jaden Daniels at the second overall pick, I do take a moment's pause here because Daniels has been trying his best to not go to the Washington Commanders. And while it's not for him to dictate, there is still this world where Washington comes up and they go, how far apart are these two prospects? Because maybe we really like Drake Maye and he goes at 2 and it blows it all up. So would you be more comfortable with Drake Maye as the Giants draft pick, regardless of cost, just Drake Maye over JJ McCarthy? That would excite you in a different way as a franchise QB, yes?
I am more interested in Drake Maye than I am JJ McCarthy for sure. That is clear as day to me. Obviously, Drake Maye was under the microscope in terms of maybe he's the number 1 overall selection, and his film has been dissected for years basically.
Yep.
And so for me, while my recommended path for the Giants does not include taking a quarterback in the first round, if they do, I certainly prefer Drake Maye over JJ McCarthy. To your other point, we don't know necessarily if Drake Maye is going to be there at 3. If you really wanted to go down a crazy tinfoil hat rabbit hole,
Oh, okay,
like
please. Oh my God.
what if the Commanders want Jaden Daniels, but Jaden Daniels doesn't want to play there, and the Giants are like, good, yeah, you take Jaden Daniels because we'll trade heaven and earth to move up for Drake Maye. And the Commanders are like, huh, does everyone like Drake Maye more than we like Drake Maye? Like, or
Should
like
we
if
like
Jaden
Drake May
Daniels
more?
doesn't want to play here, is Drake Maye okay enough for us to take at 2? Like, I, wouldn't it be fascinating? Like, if he didn't want to go there and there was all this buzz around Drake Maye that it kind of forced the Commanders into taking him so that maybe Jaden Daniels is available, or the Giants are making sure that one way or another they're getting one of these top flight wide receivers. That to me is like where you can go, like when you go from checkers to chess, is like those type of maneuvers.
And then I pick up the night and I eat it because that's where I feel like I am sometimes with these rumors. And if that were to be the case, how do the Patriots feel about Jaden Daniels? Are they all of a sudden out of the QB market completely? Are they maybe back in a little bit? Because those are different profiles of players, of course. Okay, let's not get too nuts here. Coming up here next, let's talk about the Drake Maye trade up value, the other teams that are involved, what the charts say, and why sometimes those go out the window as everybody starts to clamor for that third best QB on the draft board on draft night Thursday. We'll get into that in just one moment. Okay, Andy, as we take a look at the draft board and the cost of moving up, now we know Drake Maye is officially the Giants franchise QB. They've wanted him all along. JJ McCarthy, they were just confused. They don't spell very well. That's the big failing for Big Blue and Joe Schoen. As we talk about this draft board and the trade value, we'll let you know this segment is going to be brought to you by Personam. Oh, Personam. Personam is a nice little online utility that you can use, AI-driven cyber threat detection engine for your business. Personam improves your vision into your network security environment and allows you to see cyber threats that other tools and platforms just cannot do. Personam is always vigilant, always learning. Learn more about Personam today. Andy, the Giants want Drake Maye. They're calling the Patriots. Third overall pick. We're sitting at 6. I want to talk about the value of getting up there, but just very quickly, well, give me the value first. I'll give you my tinfoil hat concern about wanting Drake Maye and being able to go get him if you're the Giants.
Yeah, so depending on what trade chart you use, if you use the Jimmy Johnson one or otherwise, let's just we'll try to contextualize what these picks actually mean value wise.
Sure
So
you will.
right now, the value of the Patriots pick at number 3 is say 658 total points. However,
Mhm.
you do all of those different points. In order for the Giants to even consider giving them fair market value, which is what that pick is worth in a vacuum, the Giants would end up having to give pick number 6, pick number 47, and a second round pick. That's about 664 points. It's almost virtually equal. So
Right.
if there were, we'll get into it why this is unlikely to happen in a second, but if that were the deal, how would you feel about the Giants moving from 6 to 3 and giving up 2 second rounders, one this year and one next year in order to facilitate the trade?
Yeah, you have to sign off on it, I think. If you believe you have a franchise guy, 2 second-round picks, we understand even top of the second round, top to mid-second round, not a guarantee, not a lock. You're talking about franchise guy. I wouldn't really hesitate. I don't think most Giants fans would to go get Drake Maye, to go get your franchise quarterback and give up 2 second-round picks. That doesn't feel too steep to me.
So that is the baseline. If there was no other teams that were interested, and it was
Nobody
just
involved.
the Patriots and the
Just
Giants
you and me,
negotiating
buddy.
to move,
Just you and me in a room. Come on.
just the two of us, and it basically assumes that if you don't make a trade with us, you're not trading at all. So like, here's the best offer, take it or leave it. We know that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
There is reported that the Las Vegas Raiders are looking to move up. Obviously, the Denver Broncos have been talked about as someone moving up. The Minnesota Vikings are a team that have acquired an additional first round pick this year to potentially facilitate a trade up. There is a lot of teams that are interested. We don't know if it's for Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels, or others, but that are looking for their franchise quarterback and have the assets to do it. So, Adam,
Mhm.
that is what the baseline is. There's a whole host of ways that you can get to moderately substantial offers to heavily aggressive offers. And this is from a CBS Sports article by RJ White, who kind of broke down, depending on how high the interest is, how much the Giants would have to give up.
Yeah.
If there is the interest that we think there is from these other quarterbacks, the Giants would potentially have to give up the number 6 pick, the number 47 pick this year, and next year's first round pick in order to pay the premium to move up to get their franchise quarterback. Now, there's a big difference between giving up, 2 second round picks and number 6 to move up, and number 6, a second round pick, and a first round pick
For sure.
next season. How do you feel about if the Giants have to offer up this premium package to be able to go get someone like Drake Maye at 3?
And this is where I'll derail this into my own interesting agenda that just stormed across me. But first and foremost, of course it changes it, right? Of course. And you heard Joe Schoen talk about this at his press conference, where it's like, yeah, of course there's a walk away price. It's not just an infinite number of assets you're willing to throw at it. And I think the hard part for GMs is, we like Drake Maye. Okay, now we're engaged with the Patriots to get up to 3. Now we're feeling pretty good. We're just working on some of the fine details. 2 seconds. You want a 4th thrown in there or something? I don't know. You know what? You want a player? I got Darius Slayton. Like, what are you looking for here? And then all of a sudden, the Patriots turn around and go, oh, well, the Broncos just called us. Yeah, funny little thing happened on the way to making this trade. They say 12. They say first round pick next year. They say they'll give us, Patrick Surtain, they're going to give us a lockdown Pro Bowl cornerback. They're talking about anything in the world to get up here. So now, okay, we'll give a little more. First round pick next year. And maybe probably at that point say, okay, for 6th in the first round next year and maybe a 4th. They go, well, maybe your 2nd this year, right? And it just starts to go back and forth until you feel like if you're Joe Schoen, you have to have that threshold. Here's the wrinkle that I'll take with this. Because let's just assume the Giants are willing to go as far as they need to. And 2 first round picks to get your franchise quarterback still should not feel too steep. What I find sexier. Here's the first question. Do we know for sure the New England Patriots want JJ McCarthy? Because the whole premise about the Giants being a viable spot is that, and then they can still get the Patriots their quarterback in JJ McCarthy. But if they don't want a quarterback, which you would think if you wanted a quarterback, you might just stay there and take Drake Maye. Why, that option to trade down becomes different in terms of, do I want to go to 6 or will I go to 12? Will I go to 13? How far am I willing to move back if it's just about asset collection? The Vikings, 11 and 23. Those packages are valued differently if you're the Patriots and you're not concerned about getting a quarterback in that top handful of picks. And it does leave open the wide receiver option for them as well, obviously.
Yeah, of course. I like that you touched upon a subject that I thought was interesting too. Is one, as we know, there is almost no amount of money, amount of draft capital that you could give up if you can get a franchise quarterback. It really isn't. The problem is if you miss and it's a big whiff, it can set you back as a franchise for like 5 years essentially. But if the Giants have identified Drake Maye as the guy, then 2 first round picks and a second round pick isn't cost prohibitive. It is the cost of doing business.
Right,
Now, what I
right.
find fascinating is when everyone talks about why the Patriots would do this, when they clearly need a quarterback, almost worse than the Giants do, is they're like, well, they could stockpile draft picks and assets and build the team so that they're ready to go get a quarterback next season. And I think to myself, I'm like, wait a second. That's what we've said the Giants have the ability to do this season. And everyone's
Yeah.
saying, no, you can't do that.
No.
So why are we saying it's okay for the Patriots to do it, but not the Giants to do it?
And it's funny because I think I started to hint at this at the top of the show. These 2 franchises are in strikingly similar positions. The difference is they've rolled over their new coach now, right? They're going in a full new direction here. The rebuild fills on for the Patriots, and they haven't paid a massive extension to Mac Jones. He's not sitting there making $40 million and you're going, what are we going to do here? But philosophically, I agree with you. These are 2 franchises in very similar positions. And at that point, if it's that you can't just stockpile assets and you need to get your guy now, the Patriots are in the prime spot to get their guy now. And if you're comparing it relative to next year, as we've discussed with the Giants, okay, let's stockpile assets and be ready to go get our guy next year. The list, at least as of right now, is much shorter at the QB position in next year's draft class. Now, we could get in totally on the weeds here about how to build a team and what matters when, where, whatever. But if you're talking about landing your guy, you do have to look at it through the prism of you are in position to do that right now. If you're the New England Patriots, you won't know, in theory, what position you'll be in a year from now. That's why, coming up here in a second, if the New England Patriots are willing to forego their future and their franchise quarterback and trade down, I will, before we get into our top 30, paint the perfect picture for the New York Football Giants. And we'll also discuss how trading up to get a player like Drake Maye would impact what the Giants can accomplish in the short and long term. We'll get into that in just one moment. Okay, here's the problem, Andy. First and foremost, from a show rundown standpoint, we have some guys, top 30 visits we want to get to here. We're going to have to wait and see if we do, because the first thing is here, okay, here's the really fun picture. The Giants, we can talk about how it happens if they get up and they get Drake Maye and takes away 47, maybe takes away 70, whatever it does, and really starts to mitigate what they accomplish beyond getting the quarterback this year. Here's what I think is sexier, though. After all of this, back at the top, tinfoil hats, smoke screens abound. Why? Because if you are the Raiders, the Vikings, the Broncos, and all of a sudden there is a chance to go get Drake Maye from the New England Patriots, but you're back there outside of the top 10, there's a stopgap location where if the Patriots do want their quarterback and they do like J.J. McCarthy, you can get to 6 first and then go to New England. And I think that that is still should be a viable option for Joe Schoen. Hey, what are you willing to get up here to pick 6? Because you can't get all the way from 11 to 3 without giving up way more than maybe you want to, and without being able to offer the Patriots what they want. We want to have our quarterback at 6. Or maybe they say we want our number 1 wide receiver, whatever the case may be. We want to stay within that top 5 kind of range. I think the Giants would still be a viable lily pad for one of those kind of teams that wants to get up the board. Do you think that that makes sense? And do you think that that's really exciting for the Giants?
It is an interesting thought process. Move back, collect a war chest, and then use some of that to get back up and get the wide receiver that you ultimately wanted. And if you're the Patriots, for instance, and
Right.
that opens up like, hey, we're just moving around. It's almost like a 3-team trade at that point, for the teams to be able to move. I do find it interesting for the Giants. I think the Giants have shown, and Joe Schoen has shown by saying we're not one player away, that we know we need more depth. We have a whole host of areas of need, and it's not just one guy that is going to change it. Now, everyone will say, well, if you get the franchise quarterback, it all falls into place. I understand that if you can hit on Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, yes, you are good. And if that's what you think Drake Maye is, then you have to make the deal to do it.
That's
But I
right.
do like the idea of Joe Schoen talking about, we have had a lot of interest in the 6th pick and trading back. And, he also has been interesting with how he has used his top 30 visits in terms of not just looking at guys that are expected to go in the top 5 or 6, but maybe some guys that are sprinkled in the middle of the first round, into the late first round, to make sure that he's not caught out and gives himself flexibility if I want to trade back, or in the very rare case, trade back up from the second round into the first round.
My God, Andrew, look at how we tie this all together. Top 30 visits for Joe Schoen and the New York Football Giants, preparing for all eventualities, right? What if there is a trade down offer that we like? There's a couple of players here we're going to get to, and we're going to flex ourselves into that top of the second round and discuss, hey, if you move up and you get Drake Maye and 47 is gone, there's going to be players you miss out on. So let's just start there. They trade up, they get Drake Maye. Now all of a sudden the 47th pick is gone. 2 players that immediately start to come off their board here as being potentials, and that's going to be Morgan, it's going to be Beebe, it's going to be offensive line and getting depth. How much do you think that those type of players are really in line there at 47 for the Giants as being a viable option in the spectrum of needs, right? Regardless of going and getting the quarterback at 3 or not. Just, hey, you're there at 47. Does offensive line, interior offensive line, rise to that level of need in the short term?
Well, that's the hard part, because we've preached how long the Giants need to fix this offensive line. The big problem is, if you're giving up all this draft capital and you're going to get Drake Maye, you're losing a bunch of picks, regardless if it's this year or next year. And there are so many areas and holes to fill. You almost wonder, like, would the Giants end up trading Darius Slayton to get more draft
Yeah.
compensation to be able to fill some of those holes in this
Yeah.
draft? Well, Darius Slayton for Cortland Sutton. Who says no if they're both around a 4th or a 5th round pick, and one wants to reset the clock? Like, there's interesting things here. I think, what I find interesting is I don't think interior offensive line rises if you've taken the quarterback to where you're looking for in the second round. But again, Adam, you're really only talking about a handful of positions. You're talking about the wide receiver, you're talking about the cornerback room as
Yeah.
2 of the areas that, if you've addressed the quarterback, that you feel like the Giants are really, going into the season, need help in those certain areas. To me, I would prioritize those. But again, are you taking the best player available, or are you prioritizing the areas of need? Offensive line is still something that the Giants need to fortify. They brought Christian Mahogany in for a local visit. He's
Yeah,
an offensive guard from Boston College, 314 pounds, 6'3". He's ranked as the 21st best offensive lineman on NFL Draft Buzz. They have him going in the 80s. He might be a potential target at 70 for the Giants if they really, if they walk away from. Let me ask you a question. If they walk
sure.
away from the draft with Drake Maye and Christian Mahogany as their 2 picks between first round and the 70th pick,
Forever. Yeah.
how do you feel overall about how the Giants did in the first couple of rounds?
Well, I think it would speak to what we've said, right? That there's a big picture agenda here, and the Giants aren't so sure. 6.5 over/under win total for the upcoming season, right? Not expected to be highly competitive. Commanders are going to get better this year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it'd be saying, listen, like we're not punting on the season, but we're trying to do it in the right way. Where the following year we feel that much stronger. And if you look at the line right now, you'd say, yeah, like let's go. Let's fast forward a year. Franchise quarterback in place, offensive line feels that much more cemented, assuming that John Michael Schmitz comes to fruition at the center spot, right? So, of course, like at that point, when you think about the hierarchy and everything the Giants need a cornerback and they want you maybe linebacker depth and safety and all of these things. But you go, yeah, but we traded up to get our quarterback. So like we only really have one more shot to fire here. And it's going to be trying to make sure that a year from now, no matter how many games the rookie plays this season, we feel ultra confident that our offensive line is ready to play successfully in front of our franchise quarterback. Been too long without it. So yeah, I would sign off on that. If they feel they have their guy, then you got to try to secure that. They've made too many mistakes. Whatever Daniel Jones is not, we know that there were failings that happened around him that did not help him succeed over the course of his tenure.
Yeah, I mean, if this is the route that they were to go, where they were to address quarterback and then something like offensive line, I would also think that they believe that they, by out of necessity or otherwise, have in-house ways to solve the other problems. They may not solve it fully. Maybe Trey Hawkins, emerges and comes back stronger. Maybe Darnay Holmes, coming back on a 1-year deal, is able to provide some stability, or Cordell Flott, for instance, right?
Or maybe Aaron Robinson. Hey, buddy, don't forget about our little buddy. Listen, he had an injury, man. That guy could slide in and play that little slot corner position quite successfully inside of the system if it went that way.
Yes. I think that's what it would signify to me. But I think, to your point, if they trade up, they are putting their hand up saying, we cannot fill every void that we have because we gave up draft capital to get our quarterback. But
Right.
as everyone says, quarterback is most important. We have the guy that we think is going to be here for the next decade. So you're kind of trading off to say, there's 2 approaches to all this. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in the offseason. But everyone says, why not build up the roster around so that you're ready for a quarterback, whether it's a veteran quarterback or a rookie quarterback, to come in and really succeed? Or do you get the rookie quarterback and figure it all out later on, because they can cover up so many deficiencies that you have? There's many paths to this. If they move up for Drake Maye, they're not going to be able to address every challenge that they have in the offseason. I
Of course.
really think at that point, we would be looking at it and saying, well, they really hope that Jalen Hyatt can emerge, and Darius Slayton needs to be here because they don't have the assets or the ability to go fill that wide receiver 1 void.
No, of course. And that's what makes it so fascinating. Listen, we can talk about the speculation. There's a guy I want to get to here, but you have so much you need to address. It's just a question of what things get filled this year versus what happens next year. And as it stands right now, we know deep class this year, perceived to be a weaker class next year, very deep at wide receiver this year, deep at quarterback this year. So if you can try to take your shots on a couple of these key positions, you want to go forward and do so. The one other one that I'll mention here, for me, flipping over just to the defensive side of things, we talk about a player like this mostly because now he goes by Johnny Newton, but Jerzon Newton out of Illinois, defensive lineman, absolute stud of a specimen. If you go look at where he is on draft boards, well, he could be a top 15 talent. That's where the talent is set there. But unfortunately, misses some opportunities along the way here, has an injury, a significant injury for a player of his size and weight. At first, I thought, well, this is the trade down. We move out of the top 10, and all of a sudden, this player's there for us. But maybe he ends up also being a guy that you sneak a value on. One, it at least indicates the Giants have an interest in a player like this, whether that's at, top 15 or the top of the second round. But also, I always find it fascinating about, rough injury history. We couldn't possibly take a risk in the first round. Now in the second round. Like, so you have to at least have some premise that you think the player can recover and perform coming off of an injury.
You know, it's a tough one for me. I would move away from the idea of Johnny Newton, only because if you look at like a Jones fracture, which is in your foot,
Yeah,
foot injuries and these fractures for big offensive and defensive linemen doesn't seem to have a good track record of success. It's because of the amount of just pure weight and like how much torque you're in and all these angles that you have these guys at. You know, if you're carrying 300 something pounds and you've already fractured your foot once, there's probably a good chance that you're going to put enough pressure on it to do it again. It
for
seems
sure.
like a very, very big risk. Listen, we know that there's a sneaky area of need on the defensive line, Adam. You've brought it up before, and I think it's a good call out. Losing Leonard Williams, having Ashawn Robinson sign elsewhere off in free agency. The Giants still have an area of need to fill. Question is, do they think Jordan Riley can fill that void, or do they need to go up and say, we want to make our strength with Dexter Lawrence our ultimate strength and say, no matter what you can do, you can't run on our defensive line? That's going to be an interesting approach. But for me, Johnny Newton, just with that injury history and the position he plays, it's kind of like a quarterback that has like multiple rotator cuff injuries. You're like, I don't think I really need his shoulder hurting. The feet for a 300 something pound lineman, that concerns me.
Of course, man. And that's why, is it 47 where the Giants are interested? Is it, oh, he tumbles so far away to 70? And then you're saying, well, a guy with a top 15 grade as an NFL prospect, yeah, it's worth it. He may never see the field, but if he does, we just stole an elite talent in the middle rounds, right? So the last thing that I'll mention here is remind everybody over on YouTube at One Giant Podcast, get us over on X at AMAC214, at Adam Armbrecht, at One Giant Podcast, on the podcast feeds. Support the sponsors if you dare. We really do appreciate it. It means a lot to the show and its growth. We'll obviously be around covering the first round draft, maybe do a post live first round draft on YouTube as well. So get all the alerts turned on. But here's what I will say. To round out this idea of a double step back for the Giants versus going up, you said, Adam, would you trade 47 and a second round next year? Would you trade a first round next year as well to go get Drake Maye? Let's say it's just not in the cards. If you work a trade back, a simple one, with the Jets, right? And you say, okay, we're going to back up to 10, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to back up one more time to 14 with the Saints, because these guys all want their players, offensive linemen, big needs for these guys. I get Brock Bowers at 14 now. I get Max Melton at 47. I get Roman Wilson at 70. I get Jaden Hicks, who's been rising and came in for a top 30 visit at 72. And then I pick up offensive line help at 107. I get Marshawn Lloyd, the running back, at 166. And I also pick up a couple extra second rounders next year. It's so hard for me, man. Franchise quarterback, go get the guy. But if you can't do that, when you look at things like this, all of a sudden you go, oh, I got some weapons. I got some defensive help. I improved the deep secondary. I got some offensive line depth. It's so hard for me to look away from opportunities like that. And tomorrow we're obviously going to drill down on what do we want our board to look like? What's the best case scenario for Big Blue? But it's things like that that always give me pause when you talk about trading away everything, unless you know beyond a shadow of a doubt, which is never true, that's your franchise guy and he's going to be a massive hit.
At the end of the day, Adam,
Yeah.
it's funny because there's two approaches. Either you go swing as many times to get your franchise quarterback who's like deodorant. He covers up everything stinky on the team, whether you have holes in different places or not. But I think you and I both agree that the Giants have so many areas of need to fill that going into this draft, our preference is probably to collect as many assets and be able to fill those holes rather than trade up. But there's more than one way to do this, as you've
Yeah.
seen teams do it. Like, look at the Rams, look at the Tampa Bay Bucks. They assembled a team and then traded for their franchise quarterback. You look at, the Buffalo Bills or the Kansas City Chiefs. They went and they traded to make sure they got their guy. There's not one right way to do this, and I think that's important to note. So either way, whatever happens tomorrow night on draft night, the Giants are going to be one step closer to being a more competitive team.
Tomorrow morning, we will give our official locked and loaded picks for the New York Football Giants, how they can be successful, and we will include information around hit percentages, all of the positions from center, offensive line, linebacker through the defensive front, and of course at all those skill positions, specifically wide receiver. What is the hit rate for the NFL draft? Alarming stats tell you that the Giants should maybe invest on infrastructure first and foremost. We'll do all that tomorrow, guys. We appreciate everyone being along for the ride. As Andrew Mackwitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.